claimed he had gotten a ticket in Texas going 242 miles an hour. So we all have those cars we missed out on, those woulda, coulda, shoulda deals that if we had known then what we know now, we would have bought them all and made a ton of money. And you know, for me personally, I'm not sure I'm ever going to find one that tops missing out on Wyclef Jean's cars back in 2004 when I could have bought his McLaren F1, his Pagani Zonda S, and his 360 Spider for 900 grand. But I guess today I can at least rest in knowing that at the time I simply didn't have the money. And even if I had found a financial backer to put up the cash for the deal, I'd have had to take the immediate flip for 100 or 200 grand profit rather than the 10 or 15 million that we could have had if we had kept them till today. But there is one car that I continue to kick myself for missing out on, and it was a 2008 Koenigsegg CCX that I could have bought back in 2013. And you know, my obsession with Koenigsegg actually started a bit earlier. Back in 2004, I was a high schooler, 18 years old, and I went down to this exotic car show in South Florida. And there was a US representative of Koenigsegg bringing the 2003 black over tan CC8S to the show. And it was the one that Jeremy Clarkson had actually reviewed a few months prior on Top Gear. And he had kind of remarked, like, for a newcomer to the exotic car or hypercar scene, this thing is really impressive. And so they had brought the car, and I was sort of in the habit at the time of convincing exotic car dealers to let me test drive their cars by telling them, you know, that I was interested in buying them and I was making money breeding albino iguanas. And it worked pretty well, and I had driven a whole bunch of cars. So I had been talking to this guy that was bringing the Koenigsegg in, and he was actually going to let me test drive it. So I was super excited. But unfortunately, on their way to meet me where we were going to drive it, the parking brake exploded and it shot a piece of metal through the barrel of the wheel that was magnesium, I guess. And he said that, in fact, they didn't even have one manufactured, a spare for the car, much less one in the US. So they were just kind of towing it around to show it with some duct tape over the hole. So I didn't get to test drive the car, but I did get to sit in it and kind of look around and marvel at the carbon work and just the technology behind the car, because it was a really, really impressive thing. And you know, over the next few years, 04, 05, 06, most of the hypercar excitement was centered around the Veyron. I mean, the Carrera GT and SLR never really sold all that well, and the Enzo was great, but sold out immediately. And so the Bugatti was really where it was at, even though the Koenigsegg performance figures that they claimed were always unbelievably good, but they never really got verified. I think the closest they ever got early on was that a guy on 03 Gumball 3000 claimed he had gotten a ticket in Texas going 242 miles an hour. And I'm not sure if that was true, but over the next few years you'd hear things occasionally about Koenigsegg, but they never really made a play for the US market until 2008. And they appointed 3 dealers or so, and I think they sold about 12 cars, even though I believe they earmarked 40 or so VINs in their range that were technically eligible for the US market with some level of federalization based on the crash testing they had done. But those cars were supposed to come in with an MSRP of like 650 or 700 grand, and when they arrived it ended up being like $1 million or 1.2. So they sat for a while and didn't sell all that well, and periodically afterwards you'd see them pop up on the used market. And they'd have asking prices of $899 or 1.2 million, you know, a lot of money, but usually you'd see them advertised for a year. And so it was unclear if they were actually changing hands, but I always thought it was just such a cool kind of pie in the sky aspirational dream car. But around 2012 I bought my real dream car, my first of 4 Lamborghini Murcielago LP640s, and it was an orange roadster. I loved the thing, but I still kind of had it in the back of my mind that maybe one day a Koenigsegg. And later that year in 2012 at RM London, an 08 CCX sold, and it was the first time I think that I had noticed one really going through an auction. And if we look back today on all the catalog of cars that sold there were some unbelievably good deals and things that if we had bought then and held to today, you'd have made a tremendous amount of money. But this car brought 246,000 pounds, which at the time was about 390,000 US, which look, I get it, that's a ton of money. But I had such good car credit from financing everything through the rental car company that I had about as much exotic car buying power as any of the people I sold cars to while I worked at Lamborghini Atlanta. And I was like, wow, that kind of brings it a little bit closer to reality because, look, it's a ton of money, but if you got a good residual on a lease or a balloon loan through somebody like Premier Financial, your payment could be in the $3 to $4 grand a month zone, which again is a ton of money, but on a car that potentially has a $200,000 to $400,000 arbitrage and potentially a $2 to $5 million value in 5 to 10 years, as it kind of appreciates differently than some of these highly technological cars like a LaFerrari 918 P1 with their battery packs. I mean, this is a stick car with a pushrod suspension, a top that comes off, and extremely low production. It makes a lot of sense as a long-term value, particularly as Koenigsegg continues to build such amazing cars and set new records. So I always thought this would be a great car to own, and it was kind of the holy grail of buy a car that's a little bit misunderstood but has a ton of upside, finance it so that you're sort of diverting other investments into this car, and then see what happens. And I had no idea if I'd ever find one in the US in that range, but about a year later in 2013, a friend of mine, an exotic car dealer that I did a lot of business back and forth with, he bought one, a silver 2008 Koenigsegg CCX, and at the time he said he got a good deal on it, but then he listed it for like $599 or $649 or something like that. So I was like, yeah, that's, considerably below the market, but still considerably beyond anything that I could spend. So I never really thought to ask him much about it or to try to buy the thing from him. And he drove it for a little while, and a few months later he called me and said, you know what, I finally sold that Koenigsegg. And he didn't really seem that happy about it, because I don't think it was that the car was anything wrong, but he said that he just didn't find many people interested. It was just not an easy car to move. And so, a couple of years go by and we do a bunch more car deals, and I was talking to him once and I said, if you ever get that Koenigsegg back, I feel like, if I could find one with some miles on it or something like that, I might could squeeze into it, and I'd really like to. And he said, oh man, what do you think it's worth today? I said, man, I don't know, maybe 400, 450 grand. He said, oh yeah, we got to be able to get it for that. I said, what do you mean we got to? He said, well, I told you what I sold it for, right? I said, no. He said, oh, I think I got 325 grand for the car. I was just like, you have to be kidding me. Because, today the car is probably 600, 700, 800 grand. Man, see if you can get it back. If it's 350, 400, whatever, I'm in. Let's try to make it happen, because I just would have loved to kind of stretch to buy something like that. I'd had chances to stretch to buy like a Carrera GT, even a really rough, like formerly burnt F40 at one point, but nothing really checked the boxes the way the Koenigsegg did. So I was like, let's see if we can make it happen. But of course, he calls the guy, and he's realized how much it's worth, and now he's in love with it and doing other things with Koenigsegg, and he had no interest in parting with it. And so unfortunately, I missed out on that one. It still would be a fantastic car to own today. I've tried to buy a few more in the 500 to 600 range, consolidating cars and things, but it's still way out of reach. And so I don't know that I'll ever find one in that price point again, but I can assure you that if I do, I will move very, very fast.